Welcome to the House of Mourning. Hey there, I'm your host, Joelle Croteau-Willard, and this podcast is a space where my guests and I explore the raw, unfiltered truths and inner knowings we tap into in grief and in life after loss and trauma. We reject societal norms that condition us into bypassing and fast-forwarding through the work of healing. My personal desire to normalize grief is the result of my own healing journey, having lost my father at the age of 33, and most recently, the death of my second son late term in pregnancy. For those of you that find yourself in grief, recalibrating after loss, or healing from trauma, I honor you. Perhaps you are here because you are navigating, supporting a loved one who is grieving, or on a healing journey. If so, way to show up for yourself and them. Wherever you are on the journey, all of you is welcome here. Welcome to the House of Mourning podcast. I am so grateful that you have joined us again today. This is an episode that is dear to my heart. I'm so excited to welcome this guest. I've known her for quite some time, probably 8 years. She is a chaplain. She is an author, grandmother, mother, daughter, wife to an incredible partner. And she's here to talk to us today about Permission Mission, which you're going to hear about very shortly. She has worked for the largest pre-burial and funeral arrangements company in the United States. She's encountered and experienced hundreds and thousands of families and people as they walk the journey and approach the subject of death and dying. And she views it as something we know that we will experience. We are guaranteed to experience 100% of the time. The ratio is 1-for-1, one life, one death. And her question is, can we give ourselves permission to talk about, remember those who have passed on, and embrace their lives to enrich our own? She says, let's break the silence and start to appreciate our mortality and fill our lives with more gratitude through the experiences of our beloved members that are no longer with us. I connect deeply to Mary McElhattan's vision for her desire to allow death and dying, grief and loss to enrich, to inform, and to bring wisdom into our lives and how we live with the little time that we have in front of us. Mary McElhattan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joelle, for having me here today. Yes, I'm very excited to share about a passion of mine with all of you. So thank you for having me. And I'm excited to hear what comes from the two of us having a tough conversation, right? None of us want to have it. Yet, if we don't have it, then it just tends to make way more chaos and confusion and frustration. And I really don't believe that the ones who have passed on that we love and cherish and honor and brought us these beautiful gifts also continue to give us gifts even after they've passed. So yeah, I am so grateful to you for what you do as well. And that's just openly talking about grief and mourning and loss and love and courage to keep continuing to go on.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Well, I want to read your mission statement for our listeners here. The Permission Mission statement. Our vision is to share. It's your mission and vision statement. Our vision is to share courage and freedom while having honest discussions about mortality. This will create a peace for the passing and for the living still here. Our affairs are in order, leaving a lasting and meaningful impression with our family and in our world. So, wow, that's a huge vision and mission. And I'm just, curious how Permission Mission came to you.
Okay, very unexpectedly, let me tell you. I mean, it first started when I was 14. A brother of mine had passed away in a motorcycle accident, and I had a lot of questions back then. And at that time, really, nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody did. And understandably, right? Because now I'm an adult and I look back and I'm like, okay, I get it. And then another brother passed away in a car accident. And again, at that point, I was really begging my family, can we just sit down as a family that really felt close for a long time, all of a sudden didn't feel that way anymore. And so nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody did. And then in 2013, my father got sick and he wanted to talk about it and he wanted to openly talk about it. I watched a man just all of a sudden become very silent to this very alive, awakened man who had messages for everyone. And he shared parts of his life he'd never shared with us. So it helped us understand why he was so quiet, why he didn't really say a whole lot. He just was a simple, hardworking man who didn't have much to say. And all of a sudden now he's got a short amount of time to live. And he is completely saying everything he wants to say. And it just inspired me. It helped me answer those questions as a 14-year-old girl. And then the actual name itself came from my mom. My mom, back in the 50s, had a beautiful little girl, and she got polio. And at 9 months old, she passed away. And my mom never really talked about it. We knew her name, Sheila. We had seen a couple pictures, beautiful little baby girl with big old blue eyes. And that was it. So fast forward many, many years, 62 years actually, is how long it took my mom to open up. And she called me out of the blue. She said, okay, Mary, I'm ready to talk about Sheila. I'm like, okay. And she goes, round up your sisters, and I want you guys to come here in her hometown, which is Olney, Illinois. And we were not sure because, again, we had heard of her name, but we didn't really know her. And my mom, we all flew there. It was Thanksgiving. I was so excited because I got out of cooking. I was like, hey, adult kids, you're on your own. And everybody else, you can go get Marie calendars or something. And so we get there, and oh gosh, it was so, so precious. My mom never even shed a tear. I think she had held so many tears in or had cried so many tears alone that by the time she was ready to share with us, she just shared about, that morning she knew something was different because she had heard Sheila most of the time, you know, kind of wiggle the crib, right? And you could hear it, and she heard verbally Sheila, but she didn't hear any of the moving of the crib or anything. And she said that her feet literally felt like had a heaviness, like concrete, holding her down from getting and opening that door because Sheila got polio in the brain, so it paralyzed her immediately, and then she passed away within just a couple days. But we're sobbing. I mean, like, we are sobbing. And my mom just shared her story. Well, the next day, I looked at my mom. She looked like a different person. She looked like she had just lifted off, 10 years of her life. And I just said, Mom, wow. I said, what made you finally talk about Sheila? And she said, you, Mary, what you do for a living, you gave me permission. And that's how it came about. I was like, wow, if that is what this is, I want more of it. And I want others to have more of it. And openly speaking, because she didn't get to talk for 62 years about her child who had passed away. Nobody wanted to listen. Nobody wanted to hear about her three dead children. And I get it now. So today, knowing something different, that we can understand that this is the inevitable. I mean, logically we know it, but it's getting it from here to be able to outwardly talk about it. So
Mm.
that's really Permission's story of how it became alive.
Wow. That is, it's just momentous. You know, it's monumental. What a shift in your father, in your mother, in yourself, from, maybe not yourself, however, because you always were like, can we just talk about this?
Yeah,
And you had that desire and need, at least that awareness of it from what you're sharing. Maybe it wasn't conscious, however, it's so incredible to hear the difference in just your mother's energy, in her life force, in her, like that, like weight being lifted from 56 years of not talking about her children who had passed.
yeah,
It's like it was life-giving almost.
sure. And I felt like I got to know my sister, the sister that was born long before I was, because I'm 10 of 11 children. There are 8 still living, and my mother is still with us. And like, it's like, wow, I got to know my big sister in a way that I would have never been able to experience had she not opened up to talk about, the loss, the life, the funny little things she did. I mean, she was super smart. We actually, my mom was like, yeah, she lived like a full life in 9 months. It was,
Mm.
I'm like, wow, people don't go too soon. They go, they make their statement, they make the impact, and then it's time for them to go. And I just think, it's not about why or when or how, it's more when. Like when we go, if we have an opportunity to really talk about it with our families, and I'm a mother, and I, I don't want my kids to just be absent in something that's 100% proof. Do you know what I mean? Because I know. And the cool part of being a grandmother is, I walk the grandkids at the cemeteries. I want them to understand,
Mm.
hey, if you don't want to be here, don't drive 150 miles down the road. It's like that simple. Like, live life backwards. Think about what you want in the future and make sure the things that you're doing today line up with that. And not to say that we don't have that control. We don't, right? We're going to go when we're going to go. I've got
Mhm.
people who want to go and they're not going. I have people who don't want to go and they're going. So just the idea of, thinking about life backwards allows us to, if what I'm doing today is contributing to my life, and if I want to write a book, I better get on it today, because I might not have tomorrow, like the
Mhm.
reality of it. Because we say those words in passing. I'm not really sure if we really live it though.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Oh, you've just said so much there. I feel like the concept of supporting people, in the one thing that's guaranteed in this life, which is that we're all going to die. We are mortal beings, like it or not. Um, and yes, we don't get to pick when we go. We don't get to decide. It's not conscious. I have my own spiritual beliefs about that process, and it's not going to align with everyone. However, it's not conscious, right? Like, once we're in, we're living. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna go when I'm 80 and that's just I just decide it. And we don't know, right? Like, I didn't know my father was gonna die when I was 33. I had no indicator of that. I had no, like I would have never believed you or, I thought that was something that happened to other people,
It,
right?
I'm right there with you. Yeah, I mean, I remember, when getting the call from my brother at 14 and he was 22, and it hit me so hard that I was like, what just happened? I, I didn't learn about this in school. Nobody shared with me that this would happen. And so, with some of my families, I apologize for not speaking out and saying that this does happen, because it does. And everybody has permission to go if it's their time. I want permission to go when it's my time. If something should happen to my children, I want them to pass peacefully. I don't want the 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 denial of knowing that if each of us have this day, I want to create it in a way, if we can. I'm not taking away from the devastation of it. I'm saying simply that it is an important conversation that if we can have together as a family, it's very special when we do.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think what you're saying about the devastation of it, like, it's grief and loss is a different body of work, and it's right up against your work, right? It borders death and dying, grief and loss border, same, different kind of angle. However, I'm grateful and glad that you're not discounting, your focus isn't even on the devastation, right? Like, personally, I think when you're talking about out of order losses, like Sheila, your sister who you never met, your two brothers who you did meet, that to me is categorically an out of order loss. And in those situations, the devastation is always going to be there, and the grief and the loss and for me, there's no getting around that. Even if we do have a spiritual belief around maybe why their life ended so soon, because I know for the community that I'm deeply immersed in, which is what we call loss, LOSS, the loss community, is parents. So, like your mother, right? Your family would be a loss family because you experienced the death of a baby. And that's just kind of for whatever, it's like you lose a husband, you lose a wife, you lose your partner, you're a widow, right? You lose your parents, you're an orphan. We have terms in death, but not when a baby dies.
Mm.
And so we've given kind of our own label just to save for parents who have lost it, it's a long sentence, right? But in the lost community, I don't, from the people I've met, I think it's about 50-50, and maybe like 3/4 and a quarter, but it's a bit more rare that I meet lost parents who, most lost parents feel like their baby did leave too soon,
Mm.
you know? And I think that is a reckoning and a part of it that is so hard to grapple with, and your mother had 56 years of what I'm going to, be brave and call societal conditioning of, like, we don't talk about Bruno. We don't, yeah, like, stuff it. Nobody wants to hear about your dead baby, especially not your dead baby, right? But 56 years later, very different perspective, right? But for myself, I do have a spiritual belief of, it's not, oh, everything happens as it should. Like, I struggle with that with my child dying. I'm like, so you're telling me my child should have died? I don't think you're telling me that. I'm just saying that messaging, it's a slippery slope. Whereas for me, I have my spiritual beliefs about a very deep level why my son never took a breath outside of my womb. But I think a lot of people grapple with that and wouldn't relate to that, but I do. And it's hard because it bumps up against the pain that I feel, that I'm like, no, my child should be with me, but anyhow, that's kind of saying a lot. What are your thoughts on kind of that big juxtaposition?
Yeah, no, I am so thankful that you share your son with me. I mean, I know that we've talked, and I can't imagine. I'm not in your shoes. My mother would be someone who could relate, like understand some pain of that, where
Mhm.
I'm still learning, meaning I am so grateful that I have a mother who would, if anything did happen, I have a role model of a woman who has endured that pain. And one of the things she is very adamant about sharing, when people say, children should outlive their parents, she is, no, please don't say that. And I love her
Mm.
stance on that, because I think that the myths have made families, parents feel guilty when their child passes, because it's not supposed to happen like that. And that is so far from the truth, because we don't know how the order is. We just know that there is an order. And just openly talking, about your son and keeping his, life alive. And, the bottom line is spiritual, not spiritual, educated, not educated, young, old, um, wealthy, not wealthy. The bottom line is that we're all on the same playing field when it comes to this topic, right? I'm going to die. You're going to die. Everybody's going to die. And if we can come to an acceptance of that, I know there will be a shift in each and every person's life on the acceptance part of our own mortality, so that it also gets acceptance that somebody else has permission to go to. And it's not going to be an easy turnaround, quick thing to do. We've been holding this hostage for a long time, right? I mean, my mom, for so many years, it had her. She just didn't have the permission, and then all of a sudden she did, and now life is different for her, um, even just physically. So I'm like, wow, I know my siblings are so grateful that their mom is finally feeling at some peace with all of this. And we've had even tremendous loss since this has happened, since I've been in this, standing in this arena of openly talking and discussing death, and that it does happen. I've since lost a niece and her two daughters all in one day. And again, most people say that should not have happened, yet it did. And so I want us as a family, we want to accept that it did, and accept that our life still can move forward or sideways or backwards or any way that it's going to. Just having the acceptance, knowing that they had permission to go to, because I'm going to have that permission. Does that make sense? I mean, it's
Yeah.
so many gifts that come out of it. I mean, the gifts that I got that I have received over 90 days of talking to my father before he passed, as hard as it was. I mean, I remember wanting to quit so many times, saying, Dad, get somebody else. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm the baby. You should be calling the older ones. No, 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 Mary, we named you Mary Margaret Motormouth for a reason. And I really want to get my day just right. And he did. Like I said, he had messages for his kids, his grandkids, great grandkids, even great great grandkids not born yet. That is a legacy. That is not about his death. That was about a life well lived, even up to the very end. And I might add that it was more profound for him in the last 3 months than probably all the years before.
Mm.
So there's
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
result, with that. I'm going, wow. And something sparked inside of me, that 14-year-old little girl, I have answers now. I'm like, whoa, we are all going to go. So why do we not go to the knowing part of it?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's you talk about I am someone, for those of you that know me, or you're just listening to my podcast maybe the first time getting to know me, is I am so intentional, purposeful, and mindful of my verbiage. And it's definitely my personal development background. It's definitely my understanding and belief around speaking things into existence and the power of our words, right? Thoughts become things, words are in there too. And that word should, I hear so many people stumbling with, this, and it's so tricky. And I do believe that it adds to distress, that it adds to suffering. We can be grieving. Grief does not mean we're suffering. Grief is not a bad word. Being upset and devastated by a loss or a death, or even anticipatory grief, knowing someday my grandpa, my dad, my brother, my partner, death is coming, especially when it's coming, like someone gives you, you know what I mean? My grandma got diagnosed in 2006 with stage 4 lung cancer. They gave her like 6 months, whatever. She died in 4, when it's like on your doorstep. And when that feeling of, should, like, this shouldn't be happening, or, and again, it's like in my world, that is something so many parents grapple with. And I get what you're saying, because for me, what I have found, I guess, solace in, for lack of a better word, and it pulls back to my spiritual beliefs, and I don't believe they're for everyone, nor am I attempting to make them, is my son died and my dad died in his time, in their time, in the order. When we talk about out of order loss, when we talk about the order of life, the bigger things, my son died, my dad died in ways and for reasons that I don't understand. I know people die, but everything about death, the timing, the story of it, the how we're going to go, whether or not we come in as a baby and we never meet our parents, we never open our eyes, they die in our womb, they die in birth, to my dad dying when I was 33, to your brothers, to, all of the faces of death are so hard, and the circumstances, um and yet there's the part of it that we don't, it's out of my hands. I will never understand why in this life my dad died when I thought I wanted more time. I thought I had more time. Anyhow, my point is, it's like, I can't remember exactly the verbiage you used, but I've moved away from the should language around it to, not that it should have happened either, because I don't, it's not, it's taking out should out of it and talking just about, this is what happened. It's not my son's death happened to me. It happened. Death happens. It's going to keep happening. We die. People die. We don't get a vote. We don't have an ordering. So anyways, that's kind of, I think, is a tricky one around this, because I think it also is what leads to people even like, well, we shouldn't talk about death. It's all the shoulds.
Yeah. Well, the should have, I should have, could have called them more often, or should have, could have, helped out more. Or again, I just don't believe that any person who passes however they passed, wants us to continue to stay stuck or stay. I think they're wanting us to take on the life that they weren't able to physically take on anymore. Like my brother, they give me this courage that I didn't have before. I mean, the adventure of my brother who passed away on a motorcycle. I mean, I just was not adventurous person. I'm very conservative, like follow the rules, don't upset anybody. And all of a sudden now I'm just like, I'm going on an adventure. I'm taking a stand for this conversation for this family who is in it's a sensitive time. And I'm saying, look, we can't do this wrong unless we don't talk about it. I've never been that person before. And all of a sudden I am. And I really truly believe it's the people that have passed that are pushing me, pushing you to figure something out here that's going to start working versus the fight against the silence of it not working. And here we are. I mean, I always say it's uncomfortable for about this long versus this long of destroying a person's life or family, because it is a divider, I mean, death is not a divider because we're all in it together. Like you can't separate yourself from me or anyone in this particular arena. And this gives us a very solid playing field together. Because, right, we cannot separate ourselves, whether, again, spiritual, not spiritual, color, race, whatever. And I love the fact that it doesn't, because it's grounded me in that I am a person and you're a person and your son was a person and my mom's daughter was a person and they did pass. But that doesn't mean that they are forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You said the word gifts, and there are so many places where a person can connect with gifts in what you're talking about. When we start processing and like, if we choose to lean in to, I've heard other practitioners talk about it as like the death portal. I've hired two and worked with two different death doulas with my son dying. I didn't end up hiring one when my father died, and almost kind of didn't feel the need to, for whatever reason, didn't feel called to. But with Julian, my second child, really was like, okay, this is too much for me. We're here. We know we're here. And we hired some death practitioners. And anyhow, I feel like when we welcome in, and welcome might not be the word, because we don't have to be excited about it, because that's not going to feel authentic to, I think, a lot of people. But when we make a choice, a conscious choice to familiarize, to question, to prepare for maybe the more analytical people, right, is when we start really engaging with this concept of what is our relationship with death? What is our relationship with dying? What is our relationship with, like what that could even change in our lives? I think there are many gifts in it. And I know for me, I felt that very soon after, actually, just even a couple months after my son dying. Now it's been 1 year as of last month. I felt very quickly connected to gifts in my grief, because his dying allowed me to, not allowed me to, but actually thrust me into a completely new direction in my life that I wouldn't have chose on my own. But, and it's allowed for a focus on healing. But I'm just curious, when you talk about, for me, I see what you're doing as my agenda in normalizing goals are like, I want to create grief informed spaces and grief informed families and grief informed relationships and workplaces as well. However, again, different agenda. I'd say they're adjacent, but or like connected. And with yours, I feel like it's how can we get people to lean in and what would you call it? How would you describe what you want people to just get?
Yeah, I want them to get and accept that their mortality. Like that's where it really starts. Like I was doing a lot of like, okay, like my brother gave me this gift of knowing that life doesn't last forever. And my other brother gave me this gift of knowing that, he was helping somebody and in return lost his life. So, like it doesn't matter what good person you are, that it happens. And so the gift in the little nuggets and things that I was gathering from them, yet then when I internalized it and went, Mary, it's easy to stay out here, but what about right here? What is it in here that the world doesn't know yet? What is it in here that my children don't know yet, that I haven't been able to share with them, the part of me that is mortality? Like I will go one day, and before I go, I want to be able to speak openly with you about anything because it is the hardest conversation to have. So if I can have it and you can have it, I mean, what else can we do in our families? It's the most intimate conversation you can have with a person. It is the most loving. I mean, I don't see people fighting when they're talking about that one day they're going to go. So it's those gifts that I am so excited for people to experience, that kind of love. I mean, we get it when we lose somebody we love, right? Everybody comes around and oh man, you get hugs and you get loves and you get this feeling like, wow, this is beautiful, but I'm so sad. Well, after everybody leaves, I'm just so sad because now that love that was in the funeral home or in the beginning of we us losing somebody, people are genuinely sad for us, or they're compassionate and they want to offer their condolences. And um, it's it's when everybody leaves, it's like, why can we not keep that still intact? That's the gift I'm looking to keep in the world, is that kind of love that doesn't have to leave after a funeral home, or doesn't have to leave after the first initial shock of somebody losing somebody they love. It's, I'm staying in it to win it with this person. I'm not just gonna, I mean, media, it just is what it is, but media is glorifying it, but yet we're not having discussions with our own family.
Mm-hmm.
Dang
Mm-hmm.
it. What is that? Why is that happening? That's hurting more than it's helping. I don't want my kids to find out something happened to me on Facebook. I just don't want that. Right? And if it did, they're prepared because I've talked with them. I've pre-planned everything. I've said these are my wishes. My kids don't get along today. They got different opinions. I mean, what makes me think they're going to get along the day that I may not be here? Right? I'm taking
Oh,
all the guesswork out of it. So, yeah,
good question. Good question. What does embracing death look like in concrete terms in your, and embracing again, it's like people might struggle, like the hair might stand up on the back because it's so uncomfortable. However, practically, like these kinds of conversations, like what are people doing that is that indicator of like, okay, we're leaning into permission mission type thinking.
so the embracing, I hope I'm getting your question. or answering it. Because again, this is still very new. We've had this conversation silent for many, many, many years. I'm not here to just say, hey, in one day we're going to wrap this all up and should be okay with it. No, it's not going to. I know it has some work to do. There's that educational piece that together we are going to create this educational platform on the embracing of death
Mhm.
because it is a guarantee. See,
But what does that look like to you? Like, is it people talking about their funerals? Is it people talking about what they want to do with their individuals in their life before they die? Is it how they want to be commemorated once they've passed? I mean, it's more than just estate planning with a lawyer, obviously, right? So that's not where we're going. It's like,
yes.
what types of conversations concretely does it mean to you that you think are important to have that you've seen?
Yeah. So for the part of it is the pre-planning part of it, like letting your family know what your wishes are. Cremation, burial, those are two very hard decisions someone will make on your behalf if you have never spoken about it. So at minimal, just say that, because that also is accepting the fact that, like I'm going to go and my wish is. That gives other family members the permission part of it that, wow, they acknowledge that they're going to go. That's huge for someone who's going to be left behind, making all these changes, having to now mourn this person that they once had in their life that no longer is there. So, but the other internal part of it, like the embracing part of it, is the urgency to live, the urgency of making those decisions. Hey, if you like that girl over there, go say something to her. If you want to create a business, go start the business. If you want to climb the mountain, and you only have one leg, I mean, people show us all over the world the things that they have done incredibly well with some really tough circumstances. I mean, we see it, right? We see these amazing people do things out of these extraordinary situations. Well, this is one of them because we're all extraordinary. The value of a person, like my value of me, is my life and my death. And the value of you is your life and your death. And that's that missing part that, in the outside world where it's not talked about, we're not making room for people on the road anymore because we've lost contact that this person is human life. Video games for children is, shooting up people and then falling down, but getting back up. That's not the definition of death. Death is real. I mean, it's permanent. It's not something that can be reversed. Accidents do happen, absolutely, and as they will happen, as there's again, I want people to have permission on that part of it and piece of it too, because they sit in their guilt and their silence, where an outside party doesn't want to hear about it because it's too sad, but yet we need to hear about it because it can educate us. I'm at risk. I really love when people share with me about the loss of their children because I have children. So I am at risk. And I never, ever want to discount the fact that I'm out of that, like I'm not the person that could happen to. So it brings me the connection to your life, to my life, and our death and passing, and those who have passed already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just got a little chill, girl.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I feel like it's the yin and yang. It's the it's the yin and yang. It's the light and the dark together, and they fit. And we can't have one without the other, because that's with my grandpa, who was like my hero, who I named my first son after. Is I created a relationship with him because I was so aware and accepted that he would die, and sooner than I would probably like, even though he died at 93. You know what I mean? Like, and so because I was so aware and was connected to his death, it allowed me to ensure that our relationship was one that I had no regrets about. It allowed me to live differently. And so I see, for me, that's my connection to what you're saying. And my next, the way that I'm what I'm taking with this is, how can I apply that to not just an older person who's like, I know they're going to die sometime soon because they're older, but how do I bring that richness to my life, to my story, to my husband, to my 3-year-old son, and to my son who's gone already, you know, that richness. And so as our of course I want to chat forever and, you know, a day, is what is the, I want to ask this question. I love asking this question to every guest, is what is the wisdom that what is the biggest piece of wisdom that you have gained the hard way, quote unquote, by people dying, right?
Yeah.
With all of your closeness to death and dying, of course, it's become now your mission to work in this realm. However, what do you believe is the biggest piece of wisdom you have experienced from death and dying?
The biggest wisdom is going to be that I have permission to speak. I have permission to speak. And no one can take that away from me, especially when it comes to my own, like me. I have permission to speak about my death because I can. And that the wisdom in that is really about living for me openly, authentically, trusting, speaking, sharing how I feel. and and that can, I know that it's going to be a wisdom that's going to carry on through all of my generations. And I think a lot of them before me didn't feel that way, that they could speak. And now it's like they're speaking and I'm speaking, and it's such a win-win. Such a win-win. So, yeah, I'm feeling pretty wise in my old, young days.
Yes, and that's what we talk about here, is embodied wisdom from grief, loss, and trauma. And for
Mm.
me, grief and loss is, you know, same as death and dying. You know, it's so correlated. And I just want to thank you for everything you're doing in the world. I know it's a lot, and it's a lot for a lot of people, and yet there's so many people that are hungry for this message, that want it and need it, that are you, that 14-year-old girl going, can we just get real here? Can we just talk about this? Because in my 38 years with my son dying, I want to share with you, like, my most painful parts of my son dying that I'm currently living 1 year out are in the relationships where he doesn't live, because he's not spoken about and his life is ignored
Mm.
because it's too uncomfortable for other people. And I face this in even my immediate family. And so your work is so meaningful to me because it gives me life to talk about him and the reality of life, that death is going to continue to happen. And so I honor you. I thank you. I'm getting so emotional, and that's like just what I do. And so share with us, Mary, lastly, where can our listeners find you and your work?
Well, I'm all over Facebook and under my name, Mary McElhattan, McElhattan. Also, Permission Mission Facebook. I also have YouTube videos out there that I've just openly talked about what Permission Mission is, and what I'm learning about it each and every day by other people openly talking about their loss with me. And that is Permission Mission on YouTube. Just like and subscribe, and please, if you have something that's speaking to you to share on the YouTube channels or the videos, please do, because that is what's going to keep this mission alive.
Awesome. Thank you. So you've heard it here. Many ways to find Mary McElhattan, especially on YouTube. Check her out. I'm going to have everything in the show notes as well. Permission Mission. Thank you, Mary, for all that you do, all that you are, and all that you are bringing to the grief and loss space and the richness of the message of what can be gained by leaning into the reality of death. Thank you.
So welcome. Couldn't do it without you, girl. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our today's podcast. Everything that we've covered today. We'll catch you next time on the House of Mourning podcast.